Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate. And it does it with Barb Schlinker, the owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Now, we air Your Real Estate Voice every Saturday, but if you can't listen to the entire show because you're only in the car for a while, it is always available on Barb's site, barbhasthebuyers.com, or go ahead and search it on all of the popular podcast platforms like iHeartRadio, Spotify. Barb Schlinker, Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. You'll find it there. Barb, a real estate sale is a business and a legal transaction that must be in writing. I know the contracts can be very intimidating to some folks, especially if they're not in real estate or an attorney. What are some contract provisions that protect buyers and sellers? And can you explain them in layman's terms?
Well, yes, Richard. And here's the thing. Just to list your home for sale, that's a 20-page document. To accept an offer on your home, that's a 20-page document. Both of them are full of legalese, and both of them have a lot of meaning to what either party has going through the process. And in the state of Colorado, all licensed agents have to use the same state-provided forms that were written by lawyers. And the whole idea behind them is they're supposed to be understandable and logical to the public, not necessarily written in legalese. But I find there's a lot of agents out there that probably don't know what some of the provisions mean. And that's why it's absolutely critical that you hire an agent that really understands contracts, what the provisions mean, so you're protected going forward and you don't have any surprise added expenses. So when a seller accepts a contract on a home, this is a very buyer-friendly state. There's actually at least 8 different ways a buyer can back out of the contract and get their earnest money back, no harm, no foul. And sellers think that once they have a contract, it's a done deal. And actually, not necessarily. There's a process to go through. In fact, I had a Marine client recently, and as I was going over the contract with him, he looked at me and he goes, "It seems like you don't really know you have a deal. It's like you're wrestling around in the mud until the end, and then you close." I said, "Yeah, it's kind of like that." So he didn't like it, which I don't blame him. So once a seller accepts a contract, they are packing, they're planning. It's a big project for most people to move if they haven't already moved out, while the buyers are doing what they call their due diligence, which is finding out all they can about the property to make sure that they don't make a bad investment. It's almost like an intent to buy contract. The buyers can back out if they don't like the terms of their loan. They can back out if their loan doesn't get approved. They can back out if they don't like title, if they don't like the survey, if they don't like the HOA, if they don't like the inspection, if they're not satisfied with the appraisal, or if they just change their mind. In pretty much all those cases, they can back out and get their earnest money back, no harm, no foul, unless you have an agent that knows how to protect you. Inspection is probably the most common thing that causes contracts to fail. There are actually 33 different systems in a home that come under scrutiny, and some are pretty unexpected by the sellers, like the sewer septic check, the brand of the electrical panel. So frustrating. There's probably about 30% of the homes in this market that have a Federal Pacific panel. So if you Google Federal Pacific on the internet, it will scare you to think your house is going to burn down, which in fact, most of them are probably pretty safe. They've been there for 50, 40 to 60 years. However, because they've had some problems where people overloaded circuits, they caught on fire, and now that whole brand has been condemned. So every time you go to sell a home, you can pretty much plan on having to replace that panel, which is a good $2,000 to $5,000 upgrade. Water test, roof, mold, all this kind of stuff comes under scrutiny. So even though the contract says the home is sold as is, where is, with all its faults, that's not really true. The buyer can still do the inspection. I've even had buyers put in their contract, "Hey, we're only going to ask for, we're going to accept the home as is. We're only going to ask for things that involve major health, safety, electrical, plumbing," which is pretty much most of it, right, Richard?
Basements, the yard, the neighborhood, satellites, moon
Right.
phase.
It's crazy. And then if they ask for stuff, okay, when after they do their inspection, theoretically, it's supposed to be to identify any system that's not functioning. Although many times the buyers will ask for upgrades. It's okay to say no. And that's what we help our clients make decisions on when we have buyers that try to break contracts. And, contracts are different state to state. Places like Texas, the buyer has 10 days to do whatever due diligence they're going to do. And after that, their earnest money is non-refundable, no questions asked. So it's not the case in Colorado. Actually, there's 3 provisions in the contract about earnest money. And 2 of them override one of them in particular, which basically says that if the buyer and seller don't reach agreement about what happens to the earnest money in writing, then after 120 days, they give the earnest deposit back to the buyer. So that means it's 100% refundable and they could walk away at the closing table. So unless you hire an agent that knows how to protect you from those kind of provisions, you could get into some issues with contracts. And I just yesterday went over a state purchase contract with one of my clients who is a lawyer. And I went very slow and tried to explain it in my layman terms, the way I understand it. And, they don't do this every day. They don't work in that field necessarily on the legal side. So they really appreciate the information and they want to know what's going on in the contract so they can track what's happening through the process. Another thing that can cause a deal to blow up is an appraisal. So if the buyer's getting a loan, an appraisal is required. And that's an outside licensed third party that comes in, evaluates the value of the home, and ensures that the home meets the loan guidelines. So a lot of people assume that there's a database of appraisals out there and everybody knows that there was a previous appraisal that was different than the current appraisal. Actually, there is no database of appraisals. So don't worry about that. If you get a bad appraisal, you can always just get a new one. And we've had clients do that in some cases. But what we try to do is help you prepare so that that process is successful. That means that we prepare similar sales for the appraisal. We give them information about improvements that you've done to the home. We meet the appraisal. We schmooze the appraisal because we think they're kind of lonely and they like attention. So I'll show up there and I'll give them similar sales and I'll tell them all about the house and try to make friends. That way they're happy. And hopefully they'll give us a good appraisal. So some of the things, though, that they have to identify if a home does not meet the loan guidelines mostly applies to FHA and VA loans, but occasionally some of these things will affect conventional loans. So peeling paint on the outside, unsafe things like missing outlet covers, broken windows, any safety issues, trip hazards, fence falling, big deep window wells without covers. All those things really have to be handled so that the loan meets. All those things have to be handled so that the house meets the loan guidelines. What's not in the contract, though, is who has to fix it. A lot of people assume the seller has to fix it, but that's not really the case. It's the buyer getting the loan. You could say, no, it's your loan, you fix it. And you have to give them permission to come and do that if they want to do that. And one final thought is the walkthrough. So in the contract, the buyer is entitled to a walkthrough prior to closing. This is the time when I have seen what I call onboard terrorist real estate agents try to get more stuff at the very last minute, and they will hold up the closing if they don't get what they want. When you hate this, Richard, you're thinking you're going to closing, right? And some agents will go, I'm not closing unless I get. What do you think about that?
I hate it. As a former trial attorney, I understand that mentality. You've worked out something, you have an agreement, and then at the last minute, they want to nickel and dime you for a little bit more, and they tell their client, well, all they can do is say no.
Right, exactly. All they can do is say no. And so it's something that I have to protect my clients with throughout the entire process, because it's a surprise to me, but there are some agents that will intentionally try to blow up contracts. At least it seems that way. In fact, recently, over an inspection objection, this buyer said, oh, because it has this sub panel that would only handle the garage, that was made of, the brand was Federal Pacific, we want $1,000 or we're not going to close. And I called the agent. I said, really, this is almost a $600,000 sale. Your buyer's going to walk away over $1,000. And his answer was, no, but I had to ask for something. It's like, I just wanted to smack him. I'm like, oh my God, really?
Ask for a sunny day. How about that?
Yes, there you go. So my name is Barb Schlinker. I'm with Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. I'm the host of Your Real Estate Voice. And we're talking about contract provisions that protect both buyers and sellers. And when we come back, we're going to be discussing some protections that you can put in your contract to make sure you have a certainty of sale. Richard?
Barb, as a former trial attorney, it is a pleasure to deal with somebody as professional as you who knows this inside and out, has seen it before, understands it's a fiduciary relationship, and looks out for your client the way you do. We're discussing the real estate contracts and those provisions that can be inserted into the contracts to protect both the buyers and the sellers. Barb knows both sides of that. We know that buyers have plenty of ways to get out of a contract. Barb, what are some contract provisions that help home sellers?
Well, there's 69% of the buyers out there have a house to sell. So if they make an offer contingent on their home selling, many times these offers come in and these buyers' homes are not even on the market yet. And it's like, well, you don't have a buyer yet. If your home is under contract, okay, that's a different story. I want to see the contract. But if it's not on the market, then we have provisions to protect you. Like, we don't want to show it under contract if we're waiting for some other buyer to sell their home. So we have ways to do that. And that's why it's very important that you want to hire an experienced agent. And then, of course, on the inspection issues, it's really best to get ahead of it. Most people don't inspect their home. I have one client right now that we did a pre-inspection and we didn't know there was a leak in the basement. And initially I couldn't tell what it was from. He thought it was groundwater, and the inspector discovered that we do a pre-inspection. He goes, no, that is the refrigerator in the kitchen above. The water line was leaking down into the basement for a long time. So it became this big drawn out process to fix it. However, at least we deal with it head on. If we put that home on the market with that existing problem, buyers would summarily reject it. So you have to get those things taken care of. And then also, we know how to handle appraisals. We know how to handle earnest money, so you're protected. So if you are thinking of making a move and you'd like to talk to us about selling your home, give us a call at 719-301-3900 or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. She is your real estate voice, or she should be. And if you're thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. When we come back, we'll be talking about 6 big reasons to sell your home with Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Plus, we'll talk about Barb's hot new listings. She's excited about them, and for good reason. Stay tuned.